this case, you could cleverly call it a volcano-nado or something. It's not a tornado, but it's really just it's an instability with rising air. You have all this heat, and the temperature of lava. Think about how hot that is. Right up against it, you have air that's just normal air temperature. And so there's all these rapidly rising currents and all this turbulence in the air. And if it gets just right, you can create one of these little eddies, or what we would call a dust devil in the desert. We talked about this a couple weeks ago here on this show, where we saw a baseball game that had just a super strong dust devil that spun up just like this. But this, I thought, was a really great example of it happening right near a volcanic eruption. You sometimes see this with forest fires.
Yep.
You can get this happening anywhere where there's rapidly rising air. You can get this to happen. But this is pretty cool video. From the USGS, they said this happened yesterday at Kilauea, of course, which is really active at the moment. I'm not going to try and tell you what crater it's from because I can't pronounce it, but it is pretty impressive.
When I was in Hawaii, those names are tough.
And really beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, it's cool. We geek out about the whatever we want to call it, fire whirl, volcano whirl, volcanado, whatever. But let's look at the lava. That's a pretty good eruption, Tim. That lava is really, for Kilauea, which is always erupting, that's a pretty good eruption for Kilauea right now.
Yeah, it really is. And so I haven't been following it maybe as closely as you. Is this continually going on really over the next – how long has this particular event been going? I know it's always active, but
this actual flow I think is like a week old. And I kind of missed it when we were there. Yeah. It's like you said, it's always technically erupting, but you really can't see a lot. When I was there, I didn't go to the Big Island, or I would have flown over there if there was an eruption like this, because you can get a quick plane and hop one island to the other. But yeah, if it was doing this, I would have been over there. I will also point this out. There is a hurricane in the Pacific that is about 7 days away from going towards Hawaii. Now, it's expected to weaken, but I think it's Kilco. I don't know. I can't pronounce it, but it's a Category 4 hurricane. Kiko. Which will be interesting. If this is still erupting, they could have a hurricane, or at least a remnant of a hurricane or tropical storm, hitting the same time this eruption's going on. So talk about crazy video. That would be interesting to see heavy rain in the crater at the same time that this eruption is going off. So a lot going on. That's why Hawaii is such a cool place, Tim. You got to go.
They have every kind of desert. They got mountains and snow and volcanoes. It's just everything. That's pretty cool.
All right, we're out of time today, as we seem to run out of time all the time really quickly. Thanks for joining us. Vanessa Rufus is coming up next. Stick right there.
Is she somewhere specific, like in the newsroom? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here for Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We'll be together for the next couple of hours here, taking a look at the latest with breaking news, live feeds, and also some in-depth coverage that we can't always bring to you on TV. So we're so glad you're joining us here on this streaming platform, WCNC+. We want to start off with a national headline that we're seeing coming to us from Northern California, and it's the wildfires that are burning. And this has really been devastating in the sense that it's forced a lot of evacuations. We know that there's also been some destruction to an historic gold mining town, so some history that's been destroyed as well. You're actually looking at some images from the air from Chinese camp in Northern California. And so this was an area that was settled in the 1850s by thousands of Chinese miners. So just one of the impacts we're seeing from these fires. We want to get a little bit more context, though, to the situation. Joining now with Becca Habegger from our sister station up there in Northern California. Becca, thanks so much for your time and for joining us to really kind of set the scene for how much of a deal this is for the community, the impacts. And from what we understand, these are multiple fires, right, that are burning kind of in a complex.
Yeah, that's right. CAL FIRE is the agency within the state of California that oversees fires and fights fires at the state level. CAL FIRE says this is a mix of 22 separate fires. They call these lightning complex fires. So the technical name for this event is called the September, the TCU September complex fires. 22 different fires, all started by lightning. We had a storm roll through overnight Monday into Tuesday. In fact, statewide, there were some 9,000 lightning strikes. So you can imagine we have had fuels drying out throughout the summer. We've had high heat. With those storms came some erratic winds. And so lightning strikes, dry lightning, as our meteorologist calls it, not a lot of rain to stop any kind of fire that those might start. And so it really is just a recipe for disaster. That's how you see 22 separate fires converging together. They're not fully converged, but there's so many spot fires that have been caused by the same storm that CAL FIRE went ahead and named it a lightning complex fire. And that's what we're seeing burning right now.
Now, just a few moments ago, we were seeing some images from Chinese camp, and we alluded to the fact that there was some destruction of historic elements in Northern California. Are you able to kind of shed some light on that, aspect of the impacts? Tell us about Chinese camp if you're able to, and what other maybe historic features have been destroyed because of this fire.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for geographic context, Chinese camp is about 40 miles west of the entrance to Yosemite National Park. To be clear, Yosemite National Park is not threatened by this particular complex fire at this point. But going back to Chinese camp, as you said at the top of the show, this is a historic gold rush era town settled in the 1850s. Thousands of Chinese migrants came and settled here. You're seeing images of some of those historic buildings. As of the 2020 census, there were approximately 100 people living in there in this community, so not a huge community, but certainly some family homes. My colleague was in Chinese camp last night, and he actually was on a phone call with some evacuees who asked him, please, can you go look at our property and tell us whether our home is standing? And very tragically, he was able to give them information, but it was bad news. Their home had burned, their car had burned, their shed had burned. So certainly, not only family homes and structures, but also some historic buildings. There aren't many left in Chinese camp, but one of them is a post office dating back to the 1850s, and that post office was lost. There is some, I guess, silver lining, and that a historic school built in the 1970s, but in the pagoda style, paying homage to Chinese camp's roots. That elementary school is still standing. It was spared in the fire, but a lot of destruction. And of course, there's a long road to recovery for folks living in these areas. Even if their home is still standing, many of their neighbors will be displaced. Their community resources will be perhaps take a long time to come back. And so this is going to be, a tough recovery process for folks in that community.
So, here on the East Coast, as we cover natural disasters across various regions of the nation, I think about how unfortunately, a lot of the imagery that we see from California has to do with, wildfires. And I know here, growing up on the East Coast, I feel like, I'm steeped in hurricane response, if you will, and preparedness. And, we talk about tornadoes. And so, I mean, that's kind of a way of life here for us, where we live in the Carolinas. But I'm just kind of curious to hear your take as someone who lives in Northern California, who's seeing, these images and obviously is living there as well in these communities. What is it like? I mean, is this, just part of a way of life here, just to know that a wildfire can happen at any moment?
Yeah, we say in California that wildfire season now is year round. It used to be sort of kind of early to midsummer into late fall. And now, I mean, you recall from earlier this year, the LA wildfires, those sparked in January. And so we are, as Californians, statewide, acutely aware that fire can strike and spread depending on the conditions, really at any time of the year. A lot of Californians, especially those who live in rural areas, the foothills of the Sierra, know to have a go bag packed with some valuables, with family heirlooms, for example. Oftentimes, not always, but folks will have a bit of a warning, a bit of a heads up. And if you live in that area, you kind of know, okay, I'm going to gather the things that typically go in my go bag. And when this evacuation warning turns into an evacuation order, I'm going to get out of here with my pets and hope that my home is standing when I come home. I mean, that's the tragic reality that lots of folks face. I will also make a note too about, kind of the firefighting conditions. A lot of these fires spark in very remote areas. And so the fire attack is very difficult for fire crews. You have some ravines and mountains and creeks, and this is not just a flat field, of course. And so you have air attacks by CAL FIRE ground crews. Just in the last few years, we've been able to bring online overnight firefighting helicopters. So those pilots have specially trained to use like night vision as they fly the helicopters and can do water drops, all in the service of trying to attack the fire, especially overnight when the moisture comes up a little bit and you can make perhaps more progress overnight on these fires. And so, we are just entering, though, right now, going back to your original question, into a time where while wildfire season is indeed year round, this is really the height of it. I spoke with our chief meteorologist just about an hour ago, and she pointed out we really haven't had a whole lot of consistent moisture here in Northern California and the Central Valley since late March. And since then, the fuels have been drying out. And this is the third of 3 consecutive good to average water years, which means there is a lot of vegetation that has grown, and that a lot of vegetation has been drying out these past, many months, 5-6 months. And so right now, all it takes is literally a spark, as we saw overnight Monday into Tuesday, to cause these fires. And with the erratic winds from thunderstorms, they really can take off. So having that go bag ready for folks in wildfire prone areas is very important this time of year. And it's a reality we live with as Californians.
And I'm just curious too, if y'all have had any chances to speak directly with firefighting crews or, representatives with CAL FIRE. I'm just curious how they feel in the sense of like, do they feel like they have enough resources and enough staffing to address all that's coming? Because I feel like it was, within the last several weeks when we were last talking about wildfires, how there was kind of like a highlighting of this, I think it was like a prison cooperative where they were having inmates fight fires and it would count towards their time served, and it was because they just needed more people, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's the inmate crews are an essential part of firefighting, but of course we have many professional firefighters here. I think the most recent count that I saw is more than 600 firefighting personnel on the ground right now fighting this complex fire. Ground and air resources. Of course, like we talked about with this lightning complex fire being a mix of 22 different fires, they're close-ish by, but they are still spread out. And so that means you have resources on each of those 22 fires. And keep in mind that the complex fire is not the only one burning in California right now. I checked CAL FIRE's statewide incident map just a few minutes ago, and there are about 24 fires burning up and down the state right now, of varying sizes, of course, and at varying levels of what we call containment. Of course, you want to get to 100% containment, but this lightning complex fire, for example, is at 0% containment right now. So a lot of resources are being applied there. The governor's office put out a press release yesterday saying the state has received a grant from FEMA to bring in more firefighting resources. And of course, here in the West, there's a lot of mutual aid. If things get to a certain level, we've brought in firefighters from, I believe, like Alaska and Oregon and all throughout the West, Washington. And likewise, we will deploy, we as Californians, our firefighting forces to those states when they need it. So resources are definitely stretched, but this is not something that we have not dealt with before as a state. And of course, we just hope that the weather conditions are such that they are conducive to firefighting. If those winds pick up, if the temperatures rise during the day, if the brush is already dry, there's no undoing that. But it also depends on whether we get, if another storm passes through, is there a lot of rain in that storm, or is it more dry lightning? So those are the things our meteorologists here at ABC 10 and statewide are looking at as we see the progress of this fire.
Now, the other question I was, just thinking about just now was, we had alluded to before the fact that there were evacuations involved with these fires. And as someone, once again, East Coast, I think about when we ever have to evacuate for a hurricane, they're usually designated shelters where they know this is an area that's reasonably safe from, the wind and flooding elements of a hurricane, for example. Where do folks go? Where are they going when they have to evacuate?
Yeah, that's a great question. That you bring up a good point, I imagine, and then tell me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to a hurricane, there are places that you consistently know are on high ground. So no matter where the hurricane strikes, there might be kind of designated safe spaces. With a fire, of course, you can't have a designated safe space because you don't know where the fire's going to be ahead of time.
Yeah.
So you might say, okay, here's the evacuation zone. Well, we're going to send folks to this high school gymnasium here. Or a lot of times they'll say, hey, you can bring your animals. A lot of folks, have horses and other livestock. You can bring that to the county fairgrounds here because those emergency crews, CAL FIRE, they know that those areas are far enough away from evacuation zones where that's a safe place to go. So yeah, everything from high school gymnasiums to, Red Cross shelters, or I guess the Red Cross sets up in these areas, but community centers, and kind of, I'm sure like similar to hurricane shelters, there's cots set up, food, resources, internet, places for folks to charge their phones. And just having covered fires in my 8 years here in California, those evacuation centers are often very stressful times. People are wondering whether their home is still standing. They're wondering if they had to leave quickly, if the family dog or the family cat who wasn't around, they had to leave as the flames were looking at their doors. If the family pet's still around, it's and so it's it can be a very stressful time. And there are folks too who go stay with family. Let's say they have someone else who lives elsewhere in the state. And CAL FIRE is good at getting out the word, and we, as a news organization, we help spread that. Hey, if you're in the evacuation zone, you can go to site A, B, or C as your evacuation shelter.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, because that was exactly what my question was, in the sense that with a fire, you probably you can say with certainty that a fire couldn't come to wherever you're evacuating to, but sounds like it's more of like a distance from the issue point, if you will, as far as how it gets selected. Anything as far as like what comes next? I know it sounds like there's still a lot of containment that needs to come with these fires. Anything that you're looking for, your team is looking at, to come as far as updates from officials, maybe tonight or in the coming days?
Yeah, well, just, in terms of human impact, of course, as this goes, we're looking to see how many buildings were impacted. At this point, we have not heard any reports of injuries. When it comes to firefighting, of course, the people who live in these communities can be injured, or even in some cases fatality, sadly, but also firefighters can be injured. And so we haven't heard any reports so far of that. So we're keeping our ears out for that. Checking to see, what the wind is doing. That really, the wind is a huge literal driving factor of these fires. And another reason why they would pick a certain evacuation zone, they can see that the fire's going in a different direction. So there's some confidence in, okay, we're going to put the evacuation zone in a place where the fire wouldn't head, barring some unforeseen change in the wind direction. But typically these storm systems are kind of going in a dependable way. Let me see. I have some interesting context in terms of the size of this fire. This is by no means even close to the largest fire, this complex fire that we're talking about, in terms of the footprints put all together from those 22 fires. Currently, I think it's at about 13,000, nearly 14,000 acres. Let me just make sure I have the most updated information here. CAL FIRE is good at refreshing their website. Yeah, 13,371 acres right now. For context, top 20 largest wildfires in recorded California history. The largest one, I did the math, was 5.5 times the footprint of the city of Charlotte. So we are nowhere near that now. The acreage of this fire is about 4%. Or I think about 7%. 7% of the footprint of Charlotte. So you can imagine that some of these runaway fires with the worst possible conditions can really take off and have a toll on human life. But just for context, we are nowhere near one of our top 20 largest fires. The 20 largest, so I give you the largest fire, the 20th largest was almost exactly the footprint of the city of Charlotte. So we're just at 7% of that at this point. And hopefully crews can get that contained sooner rather than later.
Yeah, hopefully so. That was some great context, by the way, and really appreciate your insights. Very knowledgeable. Clearly, I can see that this is something that y'all have gotten down to a science as far as covering, making sure that you're gathering all the information and the context for your viewers there in Northern California. So, thanks for sharing some of that with us here on Live Impact News. Becca Haberger, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Take care.
All right. See you next time. All right, folks, here on Live Impact, going to take a quick break. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. We do have a live feed that we're following from here in the Charlotte area, so we're going to get to that right after this quick break. All right, welcome back, folks. Vanessa Rufus here in the Live Impact News studio. Thanks so much for sticking with us. As we alluded to before the break, we've got a live feed we're watching. Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners regular meeting is underway, and we are taking you back just a few moments ago as there was a pretty robust discussion about Medicare and a resolution that commissioners discussed. And it's called Medicare for All Act. But let's listen in right now to just moments ago in that meeting.
I know it.
No doctors left.
little comic.
Good.
Okay, I'll begin. This is a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, in support of the Medicare for All Act of 2025. Whereas every person in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina deserves comprehensive quality lifetime health care, and access to care is not only a major domain of the social determinants of health, but also a Mecklenburg County community health priority. And whereas the most recent estimates from the U.S. Census Bureau indicate that over 130,000 Mecklenburg residents do not have access to health insurance, with greater disparities among younger adults, residents of color, and residents of lower incomes or educational attainment. And whereas access to health insurance benefits residents by consistently offering insurance can lead to financial burdens or individuals and further negatively affect one's health and increases the likelihood of a family or individuals going into debt to cover the cost of necessary medical care. And whereas greater access to health insurance can be associated with positive community-level financial trends, such as higher economic growth and lower levels of child poverty. And whereas the Medicare for All Act of 2025 provides universal health insurance coverage for quality health care, including mental health care, including all necessary medical treatment, prescription drugs, women's reproductive care, dental, vision, and long-term care without copays, deductibles, or other out-of-pocket costs. It also puts a burden on safety net healthcare resources and offers the administrative cost savings of a single payer, ensuring comprehensive and quality health care for all residents of the United States. This third day of September 2025, Mark Jarrell, Chair, Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners. So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second. Thank you. The motion having been moved and properly seconded, we would love to hear from the community now.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Dr. Doug Robinson. I'm the Chair of Healthcare Justice North Carolina. I stand here alongside healthcare and social justice activists from organized labor, our faith communities, the health professions, medical students, and many others to express our gratitude for your passage of this timely resolution supporting the 2025 Medicare for All Act. By doing so, you join the leaders of Durham, Carrboro, Greensboro, Orange County, and over 130 local governments nationwide in affirming that health care is a human right, not a privilege reserved for those who are fully insured. I want to acknowledge Mr. Lawrence Brinson, who is here tonight representing Congresswoman Alma Adams as her district liaison. As you may know, Representative Adams is a passionate advocate for health care reform and is a co-sponsor of the 2025 Medicare for All Act. I'd like to read a statement that Dr. Adams provided for this occasion. She says, "Today I proudly stand with the Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners as they pass this resolution in support of the Medicare for All Act. In Mecklenburg County, we know that health care is more than just access. It's about strengthening and expanding the programs that already work. Medicare is a lifeline for millions. It's a basic human right, and we must not only protect it, but build upon it to ensure that every American, regardless of income, age, or background, can live with the health care they deserve. I am pleased to support Medicare for All in Congress and urge my colleagues at the federal, state, and local level to support it as well." Well, clearly, Representative Adams agrees that the time has come for universal health care in America. The resolution sends a clear message. In Mecklenburg County, we believe that no one should have to battle cancer and debt collectors at the same time. No one should have to choose between paying rent and seeing a doctor. No one should have to skip medical care or medication because of copays or deductibles, and no one should be trapped in a dead-end job just to keep their health insurance. Not in America. Unfortunately, our healthcare system reached a tipping point earlier this summer. With the stroke of a pen, national health policy shifted toward cruelty, stripping life-saving health care away from millions of our most vulnerable neighbors. Now more than ever, we must stand for our shared values of compassion and equality, demanding that our federal government guarantee equal access to affordable, quality health care for all. That's exactly what's provided to residents of most other wealthy nations, but not ours, not yet. Our healthcare system is porous, and people's lives fall through the cracks. When federal Medicaid funding is cut starting next year, Mecklenburg County resources will have to fill the gap. If we lose Medicaid expansion, an estimated 79,000 residents will join the 13% of adults currently uninsured in this county. Safety net services and clinics will be strained, and uncompensated care at local hospitals will increase. Lives may be lost. That situation would be inconceivable in a country with guaranteed health care for everyone. Now, to be clear, Medicare for all won't solve all that's wrong with American health care. Access to health care doesn't guarantee equitable health care, and that should be our ultimate goal. There's significant work to be done on multiple fronts, and Medicare for all will be foundational in addressing the social determinants of health and systemic injustices that perpetuate health disparities for people of color. By voting for this resolution, Mecklenburg County takes a decisive stand that will resonate from North Carolina to Washington, D.C., building momentum for comprehensive health reform, starting with the guarantee of universal health care through Medicare for all. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and community members. Tonight we witnessed something rare and righteous, a vote not just for policy but for people. I'm Reverend Dr. Janet Garner-Mullins, a faith leader and advocate, and I stand before you with deep gratitude and renewed hope. Thank you for affirming that in our county, justice is not postponed, that compassion is not conditional, that health care is not a privilege, it's a promise. This resolution may not change everything overnight, but it changes the direction. It says that we are willing to lead with consciousness, not just convenience. To every Black mother who ever wondered if her life mattered in the eyes of policy, tonight we say yes, it does. It always has, but tonight we say yes, it does. To every neighbor burdened by medical debt or denied care because of a job loss or a zip code, tonight we say enough. Commissioners, your courage will echo beyond this chamber. You've chosen legacy over ledger. And to the community, this is not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning of the movement. Let us keep showing up. Let us keep speaking out. Let us keep building a county where mercy means more than money and justice lives here. Thank you for your time and attention.
Hello, my name is Chris Barrett, President of Charlotte Metropolitan Labor Council. And I'm speaking for the single-payer healthcare and where it's going and how it can help out not only labor but also benefit everybody. As we all know, everything is for sale, and if you're not a billionaire or very wealthy, with most Americans fighting for scraps to survive in a world that is very unfamiliar. I believe that the single-payer insurance policy might be the way that can help all Americans in these uncertain times, especially our labor force, who has keep this country going.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Would any commissioners like to be heard at this time? Commissioner Rodriguez-McDowell.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to say thank you to all of you for the years that you guys have been pushing and pushing and pushing, and I really appreciate that you guys haven't given up. And I think that what I really want to do is say that, you know, as Reverend Gardner-Mullins said, this is not the end of something, it's the beginning of something, and this is not a one and done. I think you guys, we need to do this every year until it actually happens. You know, we all know that on the 4th of July, there was something signed known as the OBBBA, or I call it the BS bill. BS stands for, I know what you're thinking, but it's the big shift. The big shift is happening where everything is being pushed down to us. on our backs, all of our backs. And you look at every category. But I'm super disturbed about the Medicaid cuts that are coming. And I think this is the right time for us to be making this statement because of the serious nature of what's occurring, this big shift.
Folks, we'll dip back into this Mecklenburg County Commissioners meeting as we are able to throughout the evening. Meantime, we want to pivot to a big discussion that's happening here locally in the Charlotte area, and this is regarding some of those e-bikes, the electric bikes that you might be seeing around town. Specifically, though, how some kids might be pushing the limits, perhaps, with these bikes. So our Tradisha Woodard has been looking into this story for us this evening. Tradisha, you're working on a package for us tonight at 11 regarding this. So tell us about what neighbors have told you about their concerns with these bikes.
We have heard a lot of concerns, a lot of it off camera. They've talked about how the kids are riding in these neighborhoods that they don't live in. They're terrorizing some of the homes there. They're popping wheelies. They're driving extremely fast. We spoke with a young lady who talked about how her dad was just trapped by some of these kids. A line of them came up in the front parking their bikes, and some of them parked in the back in a lineup. So they're just doing things, and
Wow.
It's just a lot. And a lot of neighbors say they're growing concerned. And if there are rules, how are they being implemented? A lot of questions about what is considered to be a motorcycle, or what rules are there for these bikes. And right now it seems like it's kind of in the gray area, which is causing even more concern for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of looking over some of the information that you had gathered for your report thus far tonight. And there is a law, but it applies to, it looks like mopeds.
Mopeds, yeah. So that's if it's under 30 miles per hour, and says, oh, it shouldn't be allowed to shift gears, and you must be 16 in order to operate a moped.
Wow.
But they say a lot of these kids are 10, 11, 12. We spoke to a middle schooler who said a lot of my classmates are out here with helmets. And I said, how old are you? She said, I'm 10.
Oh my
So
goodness.
these kids are young, and even in the Nextdoor app, there's also a lot of complaints, a lot of parents saying they're driving down the street. These kids, they're not using caution. So you gotta caution for yourself as a driver, and for these kids that are hopping over, swerving in lanes, and then they're also in packs. So it's a lot. And they have on helmets, so it's hard to identify who's who. They're taking pictures, but it's kind of hard to identify who's who, figure out who the parents are. It's just been an ongoing battle, and right now these neighbors are looking for answers, trying to find some solutions to this issue.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, are they looking to police? Who do they want to address this, I guess?
I'm assuming it's CMPD.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are trying to look into well, this specific bike goes a little bit over 30 miles per hour. Is it considered a motorcycle? Now the rules have changed. A lot of folks just saying they can't get solid answers. I also reached out to CMPD, and I'm still waiting to hear back, just saying, are you guys aware of this issue? What are the rules? How are you guys enforcing it? But I haven't heard anything back as of yet.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about, there are a lot of municipalities, if you will, where obviously there are the normal rules of the road, and sometimes you see the exceptions made for golf carts to maybe be on the road. But if you think about these e-bikes, there's no license plate on them. You don't have to pass an exam to drive them on the road. But if you're going
just hop
as
on,
fast
they're
as
just
another
throwing on
car.
helmets and
Yeah.
going. One of the women were saying
Wow.
they were going so fast. A lot of them are, they believe, gas bikes. They don't have the pedals to stop. Like it's literally gas, and they're just zooming through the neighborhood. So it's pretty scary for a lot of folks that live in the South Charlotte area.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing your piece. Once again, it's on at 11 o'clock tonight. Keep us updated, too. I mean, I know, we've
sure.
reached out to police. Maybe they'll weigh in eventually. I'm just curious, too, about like representatives as well, if they think that this might be something worth pursuing, like a state law, if there seems to be a loophole there. So.
For sure. I'll definitely, once they get back to me, I'll get back to you guys and let you know, so we can possibly do a second version of this, because a lot of folks are wanting some answers.
Yeah. All right. Tradisha, thank you so much. We'll see you at 11. Folks, we're going to take a quick break here. We should be back in about 2 minutes. So thanks for sticking with us here on Live Impact News, and we'll see you in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back here, folks, to Live Impact News. I'm Vanessa Rufus. We're going to turn now to an earlier briefing that we saw, essentially Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, alongside leaders from Mexico, discussing collaboration as it comes to cross-border security, looking at trafficking of drugs, guns, fuel, and what each respective nation can do to ensure security when it comes to that border. Let's listen in.
In order to follow up on the elements agreed upon, we defined the creation of a high-level coordination mechanism that will meet periodically to assess progress and ensure the achievement of the goals that we have set forward. This understanding, this agreement we have come to includes measures to combat illicit financial flows, the flow of illicit fuels, stopping generation of violence, drug trafficking, and illicit weapons, each in our own territory. We have also started to address the elimination of illicit tunnels that go from one side to the other of the border with training and border security. I would like to highlight that coordinated work is conducted under the principles of reciprocity and respect of our sovereignties, and this has allowed us to have a safer border, to reduce fentanyl trafficking, and move forward in greater collaboration schemes when it comes to exchange of information within our legal frameworks, and also when it comes to prevention with information campaigns regarding the damage and the harm caused by fentanyl and other illicit drugs. As you know, addressing the causes is a crucial component of our security strategy that was sustained this morning by President Sheinbaum. I am pleased to inform that this dimension of our joint work is considered within the mechanisms that we have created to work together. Finally, I would like to say that the sustained dialogue that we have held throughout the last few months and today falls well within the conversations sustained between President Sheinbaum and President Donald Trump, and provides continuity to the first meeting, the first encounter that we had with you, Secretary Rubio, at the State Department at the end of February earlier this year in Washington, D.C. It reaffirms both countries' determination to cooperate, protect our citizens, and make our communities safer. Mr. Secretary, we have space for 4 questions. Matt Lee from AP.
Hello, good afternoon. Hola, buenas tardes. Mr. Secretary and Mr. Secretary, I want to start for you, Secretary Rubio, with a question about the incident that happened yesterday with the Tren de Aragua vessel that was destroyed by the U.S. military. There still seem to be a bunch of lingering questions about how this all came about. For example, how were you so convinced or so sure that they were Tren de Aragua members on board, and what kind of drugs were they transporting and where they were going to? And I'm wondering if you could address any of those specifics, as well as which unit of the military actually carried this out and how. But more broadly, and for both of you, there seem to be concerns around the region now that this might signal a return to the kind of gunboat diplomacy that the U.S. was known for decades and decades and decades ago in this region. And I'm wondering, one, Secretary Rubio, if this is the impression that you want to leave, and secondly, Mr. Secretary, whether Mexico shares the concerns that some other leaders in this hemisphere, quite apart from President Mr. Maduro, share. Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me say that from an operational standpoint, I'll leave it to the Pentagon to identify munitions, units, and things of that nature. Let me say this. The United States has long, for many, many years, established intelligence that allow us to interdict and stop drug boats. And we did that. And it doesn't work. Interdiction doesn't work because these drug cartels, what they do is they know they're going to lose, 2% of their cargo. They bake it into their economics. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them. So they were designated as what they are narco-terrorist organizations. So the same information and the same intelligence mechanisms with maybe a higher focus was used to determine that a drug boat was headed towards eventually the United States. And instead of interdicting it on the president's orders, he blew it up. And it'll happen again. Maybe it's happening right now, I don't know. But the point is, the President of the United States is going to wage war on narco-terrorist organizations. This one was operating in international waters, headed towards the United States to flood our country with poison, and under President Trump, those days are over. La pregunta fue sobre la operación ayer en el Caribe, en aguas internacionales, y yo no voy a comentar sobre qué agencia del Departamento de Defensa.
The Department of Defense was used. The Pentagon can speak to that, but I will say the following. These cartels have used maritime utes over many years, and we have intelligence. We know they're coming, and we intercept them, but that does not work because these cartels know. They say, well, we're going to lose 2%. We're going to lose a certain percentage of the drugs we're selling. That's part of the loss that they've included as a part of doing business. These are cartels that are earning billions of dollars, so they don't mind losing one or two shipments. That doesn't work. The president has declared that these organizations, Tenderagua, Cartel de los Soles, and others, these groups are narco-terrorists. These are narco-terrorist groups designated so by the U.S. operating in international waters, and their destination is taking drugs to the U.S. streets. And the president used the force and the power of the United States to protect the United States. And they blew up a boat. And that could happen again. It might be happening right now. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen next week. But let there be no doubt that these groups that are using these maritime routes through the Caribbean are not going to be able to continue to act with impunity. They will not simply lose a shipment and be set free. That's not going to happen. This president isn't going to allow that, and he's been clear that's the promise he made to the American people. He's elected because of that promise, and he's going to make good on that promise.
La posición de México sobre este tema es muy clara, se sustenta en primer lugar en nuestros principios constitucionales de política exterior que están muy bien definidos en el artículo 69
defined in Article 89 of our Constitution.
Respeto al derecho internacional
to international law and conventions and treaties
sobre la materia
on these matters that Mexico has subscribed to.
Muchas gracias. A continuación,
thank you. Now, Enrique Acevedo.
Buenas tardes, Dr. de la Fuente. Welcome to Mexico, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
You mentioned this briefly in your statement, but why is the U.S. allowing military-grade American-made weapons to reach narco-terrorist organizations in Mexico and across Latin America? And what specific steps will the Trump administration take to prevent these weapons from further threatening democracy and the rule of law in the region? Y, señor Canciller, dando seguimiento a la pregunta sobre Venezuela, ¿cuál es la postura de México específicamente sobre la acusación de que Nicolás Maduro es el líder de una organización narcoterrorista con ramificaciones y operaciones en México?
Let me answer in English and then in Spanish. Part of this working group, part of our security plan, part of our implementation is to stop the flow of armaments. We have the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms involved. We have the FBI involved. And it's not just Mexico, by the way. Those arms are flowing to Haiti, they're flowing to Jamaica, they're flowing to Trinidad, they're flowing into the Caribbean, and we're going to put a stop to it. So that is part of our implementation plan, and it's going to require cooperation because they're going to seize armaments. and they're going to tell us these are the armaments we seized and we think it came from here, and we'll be able to trace back the networks. It's going to take some investigative work. Or we're going to be able to seize armaments and prevent them from coming because we know these networks and we're going to disrupt them. So that is part of our agreement and part of what we're working on. And by the way, we think it adds to our own security. I would make one more point, and that is the unconventional weapons that some of these cartels are now coming into possession of. We are increasingly concerned that these cartels are now in possession not just of landmines and grenade. We're now seeing the deployment of drone technology by narco-terrorist groups operating out of Venezuelan territory in many cases into Colombia. Imagine drones in the hands of these narco cartels threatening nation states, threatening security forces. So that's something else we're going to have to focus on. Parte de nuestro plan de trabajo es identificar estas fuentes de armas que están entrando de diferentes sitios de Estados Unidos. Eso no solamente amenaza a México, eso es una amenaza a Trinidad, a Jamaica.
It threatens Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, different countries in the Caribbean, and part of the implementation work is that we're going to use resources from the FBI, the ATF, to identify these trafficking networks and disrupting them. And there will have to be a lot of cooperation there. For example, Mexican authorities can seize a certain number of weapons. They can send us that information, say these are the weapons, and then through our systems we can identify where those weapons came from, identify what is the smuggling group that is bringing them here, and then not allowing for that to continue happening. And finally, I know this wasn't the exact questions, the Cartel de los Soles, I'm not the one saying so. It's not the U.S. government. That was a grand jury in New York, which is a quite liberal state when it comes to U.S. politics. It was a grand jury from New York that talked about Nicolás Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, and others. So we are simply acting. We are only acting on something that a grand jury in 2020 handed down. We didn't make this up. It's something that was said by a grand jury through our legal system.
Pues nosotros tenemos nuestros principios constitucionales que son la brújula de la
constitutional principles, which are the compass of our foreign policy. They are very clear and you know them very well. And these are applied clearly under these and other conditions, situations that we are facing: self-determination, non-intervention, peaceful solution of controversy, of problems, cooperation for development, etc. And that's why, based on these same principles, is that we have built our cooperation program with the State Department of the United States. This clearly and unequivocally sets the route for our Mexican foreign policy. So we will keep following those principles, and based on them, we will keep trying to create and establish the mechanisms that will allow us to cooperate and work coordinatedly and respectfully with all those who wish to work with Mexico.
Muchas gracias. Le damos la palabra a Eric Martin de Bloomberg.
Eric Martin from Bloomberg.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Gracias, Secretario. Secretary Rubio, I wanted to ask you, following on Matt's question about the operation yesterday in the Caribbean, 11 people who were carrying drugs were killed, President Trump has mentioned. Did the U.S. warn the people in the boat to stop their activity before firing the missile that killed them? Or how does this fit with the authorization for use of a military force authorized by U.S. Congress? Does the U.S. have evidence that the people who were in the boat were armed or posed an immediate danger to U.S. security personnel? And can you rule out, you mentioned the operations that operate from Venezuelan shore, can you categorically rule out attacks on Venezuelan soil or an attempt by the U.S. to oust Nicolás Maduro? Also, from the U.S. perspective... That's like
9 questions. I can't remember all those questions.
Sorry. From the U.S. perspective of... Es algo que hacemos también en México, preguntar varias preguntas. And with the announcement today of the cooperation agreement, is the U.S. removing the 25% fentanyl tariff in place on Mexico? They had been in place on the basis of fentanyl trafficking, or is the recommendation that you will take back to President Trump and the trade team? And finalmente, secretario, para dirigir una pregunta a usted, un gusto ver nuevamente, secretario de la Fuente. Con la larga historia de las invasiones que provienen de los Estados Unidos, ¿cómo ve México el ataque ayer en el Mar Caribe?
Yesterday's attack in the Caribbean, because in the past, during past administrations of this same party, there has been a friendly relationship with the Maduro government. He's been invited by the Mexican government to the Independence Day Grito and other ceremonies, including the swearing-in ceremony of the previous president. So how does Mexico look upon these operations vis-a-vis cartels in the Caribbean with links to Venezuela?
This way. Okay. The President of the United States has determined that narco-terrorist organizations pose a threat to the national security of the United States. I don't need to explain to you why. They are traffickers of people, they are traffickers of deadly drugs, they are traffickers of all kinds of illicit means, and they use the money that they generate to destabilize governments in the region, which in and of itself then poses a threat to the United States. So he has designated for what they are. They are narco-terrorist organizations. These are not stockbrokers. These are not real estate agents who on the side deal a few drugs. These are organized, corporate structured organizations who specialize in the trafficking of deadly drugs into the United States of America. They pose an immediate threat to the United States, period. If you're on a boat full of cocaine or fentanyl or whatever headed to the United States, you're an immediate threat to the United States. And the President, under his authority as Commander-in-Chief, has a right under exigent circumstances to eliminate imminent threats to the United States, and that's what he did yesterday in international waters, and that's what he intends to do. We're not going to sit back anymore and watch these people sail up and down the Caribbean like a cruise ship. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen anymore. They're not going to bring drugs into the United States. We're going to stop them. I know a lot of presidents have talked about doing it. This president is not a talker, he's a doer, and he's going to do it. As far as your question about tariffs, that's not, I don't negotiate those agreements. I will certainly go back and report and make they're aware of the level of cooperation that exists with regards to security. We've made a tremendous progress. And obviously I know that even as I speak to you today, the economic team from Mexico is in Washington meeting with Ambassador Greer and also meeting with Commerce Secretary Lutnick. And obviously, that we hope that will come to some positive result at some point here soon, because our economic relations are very important. We have a lot to build on with the successes of USMCA. Brevemente en español, mira, esto se trata de lo siguiente. Estos cárteles han sido designados grupos terroristas por la siguiente razón. Ellos traen drogas,
They bring dangerous drugs,
a las calles de Estados Unidos.
lethal drugs to the streets of the United States. The president has said that will not continue. They've had a route throughout the Caribbean with no impediments for a long time. He's not going to allow that. He designated these groups as terrorist groups, which is what they are, and yesterday he had an opportunity in international waters to eliminate a direct threat to the safety of the American people, and that's what he did, and he's willing to do it again, because this is a president who's been very clear. He was elected based on that promise, and he was going to make good on it.
I will answer you in English, Eric, because it will be very similar, my answer to the previous ones. We have, as many of you may know, some basic principles in our Constitution that rule our foreign policy. These principles are clearly stated in Article 89 of our Constitution, and some of them are very clear. Self-determination. We believe on self-determination. Non-intervention. Peaceful solution of controversies. All countries are legally equal. We believe in cooperation for development, and so on. So these principles are the ones that really rule our foreign policy, and we are going to stick to them because that's our mandate, and of course those have been also the instructions I have received from President Sheinbaum. Ahora, México es un país de paz y es un país que establece
and a country that establishes relations with all countries around the world who wish to do the same with Mexico, and that follow the same principles that are ingrained in our Constitution and that in good part are at the core of international law and that we share with other instruments such as the UN Charter. That is why it seems very timely for me to highlight the comment made by Secretary Rubio pertaining to the way in which we have been able to create this cooperation program stemming from a great negotiation and multiple conversations. What's most important from this understanding that we have come to is that it is based on these same principles. It recognizes these same principles. And these are the principles that will allow for us to keep moving forward, addressing a range of topics that are mentioned in this cooperation program, all of which can be particularly sensitive and complex. But if we have that frame of reference in terms of working for cooperation and coordination without subordination, based on our keeping up our efforts, respecting each country's sovereignty, each country's territorial integrity, that is what allows for good understandings, and that will allow us to keep moving forward following a program that is structured, defined, it has goals, it has objectives, and that will be periodically assessed. Furthermore, we do this based on also the fact that in these first 8 months there have been tangible results. Tangible results in a relatively short period of time. Secretary Rubio was saying, and with good reason this morning, some of the changes that we are committing to would take longer than what we all wish they would take. However, in just 8 months, we have seen concrete results. Encounters at the border have been reduced by 93%, actually a little more according to the latest figures. Seizures of fentanyl since the beginning of President Sheinbaum's administration have been reduced by 50%. The last information coming from the security strategy implemented by Mexico shows us that there has been a reduction in crime in Mexico of 32%. In the presidential report just a couple of days ago, it was mentioned, another figure was mentioned because we hadn't taken August into account. But it has dropped further. So we have strategies that work and that are based on these principles. I think that that is what I would like to highlight and rescue from all of this, because it is important to show the U.S. and Mexico communities that we can build cooperation and collaboration models that work, that provide results, that can have a mutually convened reference framework, and that are based on the commitment of maintaining those principles that are those that our Constitution has gathered. Thank you. Thank you. Last question, Enrique Sanchez from Excelsior. Mr. Secretary, good morning. Mr. Secretary Rubio, good morning and welcome to Mexico. One question for both of you. Secretary Rubio, you were saying The series of items and progress made in terms of security, in terms of containing illegal migration and other commercial aspects, etc. I would like to ask you, this understanding was a specific security agreement, and what would we see in the field in terms of operations, joint operations, or each security forces in their own territory respecting sovereignty? What would be the ideal scenario under which Mexico and the United States would be working in terms of these circumstances and these communities that you have highlighted, so that there can be greater cooperation? And I would also like to take this opportunity to ask, based on the conversation this morning in Palacio Nacional, have you considered a future meeting between President Sheinbaum and President Trump in the next few months?
I'll start. I won't speak directly about the different issues when it comes, because cartels read the press too, so I'm going to say the following. They've always existed, but we've broadened them because of resources. For example, if there's a group that crosses the border with drugs, Mexican authorities know, they let us know where they are, who they are, and we can act then against them. Same thing with us. If we know that there's a group working in Mexico or that's coming into Mexico with weapons or whatever the case may be, we will send that intel to Mexican authorities, and then they can act. Obviously, both countries have their own collection of intelligence, different sources, informants, for example. Many people who are locked up in the U.S. start providing testimony. They provide many details, and we can share those things with each other. Also, joint training. There are things that we can learn from your experience and things that you can learn from our team. Specifically, for example, certain technologies that the U.S. might have been able to develop in other places, and this is something that the Mexican authorities may have identified as something that would help them out in their actions. We could provide those kinds of things as well. So cooperation has always existed between law enforcement agencies, but we're talking about expanding that to a broader, more structured type of cooperation, independent on the situation. But we both have intelligence we can share, information we can share, and all of that helps. And capacities also that could be provided through equipment if it is requested. They might already have it and not need it. La pregunta tiene que ver con...
We've always cooperated. There's always been law enforcement cooperation. We're talking about amplifying now. We already have started to do it. Just as a great example, let's say there's a gun running group that's coming out of the United States, headed into Mexico. We identify it. We don't get there in time to stop it. We pass that on to the Mexican authorities who can act on it. Likewise, they can identify a drug shipment that's headed our way. Maybe it got past their systems, but now is in the United States, and we can act on it. Anytime you take people in the jail, they become informants. They give you information about the operations of cartels and drug organizations.
All right, folks, we're pivoting away from this briefing with Secretary Rubio and Mexican leaders regarding the border security collaboration they had been discussing. We want to turn to a headline that is really causing a lot of dialogue out of Houston, Texas, and this is regarding, I guess, what you might say is a childhood prank that we have seen kind of time and time again over the years, but this, unfortunately, it was a situation that turned deadly, and it involved an 11-year-old boy. There have been some recent developments in this case as well, so we want to get to our sister station and Len Kennan, who's been following this story for us. So, Len, thank you so much for making time for us here on Live Impact News. We wanted to kind of get the very latest, because it sounds like there's been the homeowner in this case. There's been a charge levied against him, and he also had an appearance in court. Where's the very latest, that we've picked up with today on where this case stands?
Yeah, sure, Vanessa. The homeowner's name is Gonzalo Leon Jr. He's age 42. He's an Army veteran. He's been charged with murder. Today, he made a court appearance. His bond was set at $1 million. His attorney kind of fussed about that, but the DA thinks it's an appropriate bond. In his words, given the nature of the crime. There's also some discussion about upping the charge to capital murder given the age of the child.
Yeah, so I mean, our understanding here, this was a case of, for lack of better description, ding dong ditch, childhood prank that frankly a lot of kids have played over the years, where they ring somebody's doorbell and run away. But in this case, it was an 11-year-old boy, and it sounds like he had a family member who was with him, and this homeowner who's now facing charges fired shots and hit this 11-year-old boy. What else do we know about the folks involved, both on the side of the children and also on the side of this homeowner now who is facing charges?
For the prosecution, the key witness is going to be the victim, 11-year-old Julian Guzman. That night, Saturday night, on the east side of Houston, they were playing this game of ding dong ditch. They were ringing, knocking on doors, and running. Julian was with his either 10 or 11-year-old cousin at the time. They were both doing this. Apparently, according to investigators, they knocked on the door of the suspect 3 times in a 15-minute span. The third time they did it, when they ran, the suspect, according to investigators, was hiding behind a fence in the yard, in investigators' words, lying in wait. And after that third time they knocked and the boys took off, he went after them. And about a block away, according to investigators, he fired 2 shots, one into the ground, the next one hit Julian in the back. His cousin was there. The cousin says he tries to pick him up. The cousin now becomes a prime witness. Now, according to the DA who I talked to yesterday, the cousin has not positively identified the suspect yet. He has described what he was wearing, but they also acknowledge that given his age and the trauma he witnessed, that they're taking it easy with him as to how much they're pushing him on information at this time.
I'm just curious, what the community response has been to this. I can imagine with, the life lost here being so young that folks probably have some opinions about this and might be sharing this with you and the reporters on your staff.
A lot of outrage, of course, given the age of the kids. There's always a debate. Well, weren't these kids warned that playing this kind of game can get you in trouble? That may be true, but you don't expect this kind of trouble. And the DA would argue, look, these kids posed no threat. They ran, they weren't armed, they didn't steal anything, and one of them was shot. And so the outrage, of course, is the nature of the crime. It was a block away. It wasn't at the front door. It wasn't, according to investigators, as if this person could be threatened. I also asked the DA, well, did he have any clue that these were young children? And he said, how could you not? I mean, they're 10 and 11 years old, and you chased them for a block. How could you not know? So, yeah, there's a lot of outrage, especially in that community. Now, we have not talked to the boy's family. There was a memorial at the site of the shooting this evening, and family members have not talked, but they definitely want justice.
Now, I mean, you had alluded to the fact that there seems to be, I want to say, more or less, a consensus that the boys weren't posing a threat. And so inevitably there's always going to be a question about stand your ground or castle doctrine in a case like this, where some folks might ask, does that even apply in this situation? Has that been broached as something to be discussed adjacent to this case at all?
Yeah, Vanessa, not from the defense attorney, but I posed that question to the Harris County District Attorney, and I'll paraphrase. He said, no way, no how, for the reasons that I just laid out to you, that they're boys, they're not posing a threat, they didn't steal anything, they weren't armed, and they were running away, in his words. That's a quote. And yet, you decided to open fire. So he says, in this case, castle doctrine, stand your ground, not applicable.
Now, I mean, there is the other discussion here about, I guess, the resurgence of this as a prank to do. We know nowadays social media plays a role in this situation, while very, very extreme, seems to be just the latest case of I want to say, this prank going haywire, if you will. And we've heard law enforcement in different parts of the country where some of these cases have escalated, weighing in, saying, don't even try this prank. Have you heard anything of that nature from law enforcement where you are, or has there been any sort of messaging from authorities about, I guess maybe directly to kids, about doing this?
No, not in this particular case, but I will tell you, social media does play a role in some of these pranks. And on the night of the shooting, Julian Guzman did have his phone. When he knocked on the door at this gentleman's house, he was recording. And when they ran, he was recording. And when he was shot, that phone was recording. And according to investigators, you could hear the 11-year-old gasping for air because his phone was recording. Obviously, they want to record so they can potentially post, I would assume, or show it to their friends. So clearly, that kind of ups the ante in terms of getting a kick for the kids. I mean, I did this when I was a kid in the last century, I'll point out. But this was... we've not heard like officers saying, look, you shouldn't do this, parents, watch your kids. I've had friends of my own daughter who's a teenager say they've done this, and I would tell her, I have said to her, that's not a good idea, because I'm in the news business, that somebody could come out with a gun. Now, they may not shoot you, but they'll certainly scare you. In this case, according to prosecutors, the guy shot.
Yeah. I mean, what a case, and clearly making a huge impact on your community there. What are you looking to as far as, next steps or developments that you're keeping an eye out for this case going forward?
So obviously the next step is how much more information can they get out of the witness, the 10 or 11-year-old cousin of the victim? Will bond be reduced? Will they up the charge to capital murder, which makes him eligible for the death penalty? And as you know, in Texas, the death penalty is active and is used. If that becomes the case, we'll just have to see. The gentleman, Leon, the suspect, has an attorney, an appointed attorney. He didn't have much to say today in terms of defense, but he pointed out, according to, the way the laws are, hey, you are innocent until proven guilty. So we'll have to see how it plays out over the coming days. But the prosecution, Harris County DA, seems fairly confident that they've got the right person and they have the right charge. Remember, they talked to this guy Saturday night, and he was questioned, he was held. I even think they took him into the police station. They did not charge him that night. The prosecutor said they didn't have probable cause. So they needed to get more information. Then Monday, they arrested him and charged him with murder. So that's where we stand. Now, what happened in those conversations? According to the prosecutor, the suspect said nothing, which most lawyers would tell you, don't say anything. He didn't. He didn't admit to anything. He didn't say anything about what happened, how it happened, where, nothing. And so they have nothing from him to go on. So everything is based on, obviously, the witness of the kid that was there. And, of course, you have a victim.
Yeah, really interesting and heartbreaking case. Len Cannon with KHOU, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Impact News. Really appreciate all your insights and the reporting here as well.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa.
All right. Folks here on Live Impact, thanks so much for sticking with us. We are taking another 2-minute break, so we'll be back very promptly for you with more updates from local, national, and global headlines. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Live Impact News. Touching on another headline for us here. This is going to be on the local front. Of course, as school is getting underway, CMS just hours ago released some of its latest data regarding scores and essentially how the school district is performing academically in comparison to other North Carolina districts. So let's listen into that briefing. Apparently there were some wins to celebrate according to district leaders, and we'll come back, of course, with anything big and breaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Now we sound like we're in an elementary school. Welcome. I am Dr. Ingrid Medlock, the Chief of Staff and Community Engagement, and I am the Interim Chief Communications Officer with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. Welcome to all of you. I want to say a very special thank you to Principal Shana Ray. What a phenomenal welcome and crown experience we have had. From the moment I got out of the car till I walked into this space, it has been a wonderful experience, and I think everyone would agree. So thank you so much for hosting us today. We are excited to share some wonderful news with all of you. I want to say a very special thank you to all of our special guests and all of our elected officials. And without further ado, are we ready? We're ready. Dr. Crystal Hill, our superintendent, will begin.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Principal Ray, for hosting us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate the 2024-25 academic data for Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. Before we get started, I would like to recognize our Board of Education, and we have 4 members who are with us today. If you stand to be recognized. First, we have our Board Chair, Stephanie Sneed. Vice Chair, Gregory D. Rankin. Board Member, Dr. Monty Witherspoon Brown. Board Member, Lisa Klein. And Board Member, Melissa Easley. Next, I would like to recognize our Mecklenburg County Board of County Commissioner Chair, Commissioner and Chair Mark Jarrell. Please stand to be recognized. Thank you so much for being here today and for your continued support. Well, it is so hard for me to contain my excitement today. Today, we are so proud to share the significant milestones of Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools and our journey of educational excellence without exception. We have some truly historic and phenomenal data to share with you. This data not only highlights the remarkable achievements of our students, but it underscores the Herculean efforts of our principals, teachers, support staff, families, and dedicated partners in fostering an environment of excellence and support. These outcomes reflect the hard work, dedication, and resilience of our students, our educators, and our community. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools' commitment to academic excellence remains steadfast, and this data serves as a testament to our mission. Together, we faced many challenges, but today we are seeing the fruits of our labor shining brightly, illuminating a path toward the endless possibilities that await our students. As we unveil this remarkable data, we will also discuss the innovative strategies and programs that have propelled our students forward, how these strategies align with our district's 5-year strategic plan, and what steps we will take to continue to lift even more students to new heights of academic achievement. You will also hear from 6 of our outstanding principals whose schools have earned exceptional results. They each have a unique story to share about their students and their school's journey to excellence. In addition to our staff, students, and families, I also want to thank our many community partners for their unwavering support as we work together to ensure that every student in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools is prepared for their next step in life. Your partnership has been invaluable in helping us grow and improve. We share this incredible success with all of you. Thank you once again for being here, and now on to the data. First, we will hear from Beth Thompson, Chief of Strategy and Innovation.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start by making sure everybody knows how to access the full data set we'll be looking at today and then some, and the definitions of any acronyms that we're going to be using. Located on the screen, also located in your handout, there are 2 QR codes for your use. The first QR code on the left-hand side has a direct link to the state website where you can find information for all districts all across the state. On the right-hand side, you'll see the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools website, this presentation, and additional data that we have available for you at all times. Each year, we receive a large amount of data from the state of North Carolina telling us about the academic achievement of our students for the previous school year. This data is all a part of the North Carolina accountability model. It's our goal each and every year to communicate results to our stakeholders with transparency, focus, and intentionality, and to not have you here for 2 or 3 hours. We have done that again, made every effort to do that again here today. Our focus for this presentation will be on the state accountability model, but there's additional data in the appendix of this presentation. We'll take any questions that you may have at the end of our presentation today, and for any additional inquiries for the media, please reach out to us using media@cms.k12.nc.us. As a reminder, the state provides results using 4 descriptors: not proficient, level 3, level 4, and level 5. If a student achieves a level 3 on a state assessment, the student is considered grade level proficient. Grade level proficient means just what it says. A student has sufficiently mastered grade level skills and is ready for the next grade level. If a student achieves a level 4 or a 5 on a state assessment, the student is considered college or career ready. The state uses grade level proficiency, that's a level 3, 4, or 5, to determine school performance grades in the state accountability model. Therefore, our presentation will focus on those metrics today. But college and career readiness data, including performance by student racial, ethnic, specialized service, and economically disadvantaged student groups, is transparently available in this appendix of this presentation, organized by grade level and content area. A few other acronyms you'll see in our presentation today are listed on this slide. More information about any of these categories can be found on our state website. So let's dig in. Let's look at 24-25 academic performance of students in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools within the North Carolina State Accountability Model. School performance grades are determined by a combination of metrics, all determined by the state of North Carolina. On the left, you see that for elementary and middle schools, the metrics are reading, math, math 1, and science grades 5 and 8 grade level proficiency scores, the progress of English language learners, and student academic growth in reading, math, and science. On the right, you see that for high schools, the metrics are different. They include English 2, math, and biology grade level proficiency scores, graduation rate, student performance of 17 or higher on the ACT or silver on the ACT work keys, the rigor of student math courses in which students are enrolled, the progress of English language learners, and student academic growth in reading, math, and science. For all schools, a participation rate of a minimum of 95% of students assessed is expected. Participation rates factor into the school's school performance grade. In Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we have goals and guardrails. Those take all of the state accountability model data and provide a more narrow focus on our district's areas for continued improvement as a part of our 5-year strategic plan. These areas of focus align to our community's vision and values. Tune in to our Board of Education meetings for end-of-year goal reports. Our first end-of-year performance on Goal 1, K-2 literacy, took place on Tuesday, August the 26th, and these reports will continue by goal through November, and then again throughout the year. We'll look briefly at how information is presented to you today is organized, and I'll do that as part what's included in this presentation and then also including what's in the appendix. Within the presentation, I'm going to discuss overarching state performance measures. These are often the headlines, and I want to be sure that we start out with those. I'll then discuss additional school performance measures required by the state of North Carolina by subject and grade level. Deputy Superintendent Dr. Melissa Balknight will share our areas of focus in response to this data and alignment with our goals for the 25-26 school year. And we've saved the best for last, time for our brilliant, capable, wise, and the hardest working people I know, an amazing panel of principals who will share what their schools did last year that made such a difference and what they're planning to do to grow that success even further this year. In the appendix, there's additional data located here, and again, all of this is already on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools website. So here we go. We'll start with our headline results. And what better way to start than this? In the 24-25 school year, Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools outperformed North Carolina in overall grade level proficiency and saw significant increases in student grade level proficiency in both reading and math, composite increases of 5.2% in reading, grades 3-8, 4.6% in math, and 8.2% increase in math 3. And by the way, that's already the headline for the Charlotte Observer today. Of the 175 schools that receive a growth score and a school performance grade, 156, that's 89.1% of Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
All right, folks, we wanted to pivot away from this from just a moment and quickly remind you that we do have something special coming up for you at 9 o'clock, so just about a half hour away. Our sports team is getting us ready for kickoff to NFL season and also the Panthers. So make sure you stay tuned here to WCNC Plus as they have that special for us, looking at one-on-one sit-downs with the players, in-depth conversations, really getting us ready, hyped for the season. So that will be, once again, 9 o'clock here on WCNC Plus. We are going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we'll be back with another, speaking of in-depth conversation, dialogue about a big headline from a mass shooting in Maine from a couple years back. There's been a big development. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone. As we prefaced before we took that quick break, we are following a big development out of that mass shooting from 2023 in Maine. You might remember this was a shooting at the bowling alley that took nearly 20 lives and led to a 2-day manhunt, after which the gunman, authorities say, took his own life. We just learned of a lawsuit that's been filed, and we spoke with our content partner in Maine about what this development is specifically, what it means, and really just looked at the impacts of this shooting to this day there in that town in Maine. Let's listen in. We're joining now with Chris Costa, who's with our sister station out of Maine. Chris, you not only covered that horrible incident back in 2023, but also are following up with this new lawsuit where it sounds like dozens of people are trying to essentially point to the government as someone or an entity that was at fault here, they say, with this mass shooting, missing some signs. Can you walk us through what the latest development is here today?
Yeah, absolutely, Vanessa. So essentially what this is a culmination on the families and the victims' part of this process of filing a lawsuit against really the U.S. Army. What they are arguing is that members of the Army, as well as members of the military hospital where Robert Card, the shooter, where his team members, his fellow soldiers had brought him for initial care, this lawsuit is essentially claiming that not only did the soldiers in Card's unit fail to do their jobs by picking up on some of the cues about his mental health, potential issues of danger, but they're also saying that staff at the Keller Army Hospital, also nearby where they were doing training in New York, also that medical staff failed to recognize those things and hold him. Now, as we did our research going through this, we noticed there were plenty of when the Army released some details from its investigation into its own entities, right? They were saying, well, we know that these doctors knew about X, Y, and Z, his homicidal tendencies, his potential to have a hit list, and some of his other mental health issues that Robert Card was dealing with. And so the families, and the victims' families rather, and the survivors had been coming together today to file a lawsuit officially. We kind of knew that this was coming, but they are going after the Army and specifically saying that its staff and the medical team that took care of Robert Card were negligent in their approach in notifying the other people who would have been in a sort of like a due diligence type of reporting. Any other hospital staff, his family, Robert Card's family back home, any law enforcement here in Maine that could have potentially intercepted or intervened somehow before Robert Card went on the mass shooting. So that is what the families, the families of the victims and the survivors have filed here today with this lawsuit against the Army.
Now, one of the interesting points that I have seen here is it's a group of firms. So there are multiple law firms that are involved. Some of them are based in Maine. One of them we're seeing is actually based in Texas, and it looks like this specific Texas law firm was actually involved with a different suit from back in 2017 where there was a church shooting that an Air Force service member committed, and apparently they did a suit as well. And the federal government in this case was found to be partly liable, and there was a settlement essentially. So there seems to be at least some recent precedent, relatively recent precedent, for the government essentially being held accountable for instances similar to what happened in Lewiston.
I would say, based on the information that you're talking about, I'm not really remembering exactly, unfortunately, which shooting you're talking about. I think it might have been Sutherland Springs.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
And so all I can really say to that point is I don't know how the courts are going to decide. I don't know if that's going to play into the legal process here for these attorneys here in Maine, if they'll be conferring with the attorneys from Texas to see if they can use that as maybe a point of case law or reference or something as a precedent, as you mentioned, to try to get this to swing their way. But I don't have any insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like in general, though, I mean, this is something that has hit the community hard and continues to do so. I mean, my understanding is you were there covering, the actual mass shooting that happened in 2023 and have been doing reporting since, very much in depth. I mean, what can you say as far as what you've learned about, what transpired and the impacts that continue to this day following that shooting for your community?
as far as what's transpired, for the most part, we have kind of fleshed out all the details about what led up to the shooting. What were those sort of dropped balls? The phrase you're going to hear over and over again from the families and especially the lawyers really is that the Army dropped the ball. That's what they're claiming. That the Army dropped the ball in multiple instances where they could have intervened with Robert Card. So this has had a pretty wide impact for this community, and it's really run quite a bit of a spectrum. For some people, this was, as you can imagine, incredibly emotional, took away their sense of safety from going to some of these places. The bar itself, it was called Shemengi's Bar and Grill. The owner decided not to reopen it as a bar. Instead, it's been turned into a 24/7 shelter in the city. But you can also imagine for the bowling alley, it's been incredibly tough. They had to completely renovate the inside while trying to maintain their name that is always going to be associated with Robert Card and a mass shooting. But I know that what they've been trying to do by giving it a fresh look, by welcoming people back into the doors, is to say, this did happen in our community. It is part of our history, but it doesn't mean it needs to affect everything we do from here on out. So again, there's some people on one side who have been extremely affected by this, and then there are others who are maybe not quite as vocal about how much this has affected them. There were some people that I spoke to around the 1-year mark who said, no, I don't plan on attending any of the 1-year ceremonies to kind of commemorate. It's just not something I want to be a part of. And so it was hard for us as reporters, right, when we're always trying to get people to talk and share their stories and share how an event has impacted them. There were some people who said, I don't want to talk about it anymore. There were some people who even told me, I'd rather go rent an Airbnb for the entire weekend and be away from sort of those ceremonies. So you had asked me a couple of questions, Vanessa, and I want to make sure that I capture all of them. You'd asked about kind of the latest developments. Really, we had worked on getting everything that led up to the shooting and then all of the documents that kind of came out afterward, whether it be the Army's internal report, the reports that came out of the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office here in Maine detailing how many interactions they had had with Card, how they had tried to use our state's yellow flag law, which is in itself a difficult process described by both sides, Democrats and Republicans who helped pass it through. They understand that it is a bit of a cumbersome process. That was the word that came up a lot about a year ago, was that it's cumbersome. I can go into more detail on that if you want, but I know that really the focus for us has been, figuring out where did people drop the ball. That was the stuff that came really after the first 48 to 72 hours where, if you remember, there was a shelter-in-place order while there was a manhunt for Robert Card, who the officers eventually found in the back of a trailer had taken his own life. A trailer that was a place that he had worked previously at Maine Recycling Corporation. But there was a lot of, there was some fear from people about, hey, I was supposed to go hunting this weekend. This is supposed to be the start of hunting weekend. And you can imagine that the sound of gunshots, even with a hunting tradition in this state, as I'm sure it is in North Carolina, there was some apprehension, some uneasiness about having people out walking around in the woods while officers were looking for the shooter. So our work really focused on what happened in those 24 to 72 hours while they were looking for Card and what he had done, the fallout, obviously, of all the people's lives that had been affected by this, and then on the back end, kind of coming into that timeline over the year leading up to, the year since the events, we had been working to kind of ferret out all of that information from the different parties that really had a touch point with Robert Card. And there was one more question you asked me, Vanessa, that I'm sorry, I can't remember. Can you ask it again?
Well, I was, really trying to get at the impacts that we see until, this day, how this has shaped the community, and, with such a footprint, like with an incident just like that, I can imagine that to this day there are still some signs. I think you touched on it in the sense that, for example, with the bowling alley, it sounds like they're still kind of dealing with, I don't know if it's safe to say, a reputation or just kind of the notoriety of that happening there, but there are probably, reminders of this around the community.
There certainly are, and one of the you could say it's a good thing that came out of this is they had stood up what's called the Maine Resiliency Center. It's a center that uses both state and federal funds after a mass shooting happens from the Department of Justice to set up a center where people can essentially come in and do walk-in free therapy. And they're meeting with their peers. They even had special groups that they would have for people who were there that night at either the bar or the bowling alley, who could connect with each other, know that they were only talking to people who were, in essence, their peers in that regard. And that center has spurred a lot of healing throughout the community. And I've heard from people who have used it over the past 2 years who have said, this has been a critical place for me to kind of open up, express how this has affected me in my life. Because as you can imagine, for some of the survivors, maybe the physical wounds might not be as big, but the mental wounds certainly are. And so that's been a place for them to take a moment, reflect on what they've gone through, have some support from both peers and professionals. And so that's been one way that this has really rippled through the community. You can also imagine, so at the bar, it was a cornhole tournament was happening. If you guys are familiar with the game with the beanbags, and so a lot of cornhole tournaments then came out of that where people said we're going to raise money for the victims. There was a very big softball fundraiser because one of the victims, Ron Morin, was an umpire for these recreational softball games of adults who would get together and they'd play games, just I'm sure as you guys do down there. And so he was a fixture in that little community. So each community that everybody, any victim or survivor has been part of, has sort of had this little ripple effect of ways that they can support them. So it might be a softball fundraiser. In one case, it was a local company supporting one of the survivors through a donation. So there have been a lot of different ways that people have tried to reach out. There was also the Victims Fund. So there was money that actually went to the survivors and the victims' families as part of this. But the overall sentiment that I heard from people was that it was obviously not about the money, but just the fact that they have somebody that they can connect with to share what was obviously a very painful experience.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about as well some of the signs that, the plaintiffs say that were overlooked. I heard you reference the fact that he had a tendency to make hit lists. Were there any other notable signs that these families say should have really been caught, should have really been a red flag about Mr. Card's behavior?
I think that really the big ones are the ones we've touched on, that doctors had documented that Robert Card had homicidal ideations. I'd say that was the one that in my reporting, when I read that in the U.S. Army's report, it was essentially an audit, but it was an investigative report done by an Army investigator who said, they went through kind of each step of the process. When did Card start exhibiting these symptoms, and who intervened with him along the way? So there were talks about could New York have implemented its red flag law where they could have separated Robert Card from his guns because he was training in New York. Could New York State Police have done anything when they interviewed him? But really what the plaintiffs in this case are focusing on is the U.S. Army, because of the soldiers in his unit who knew Card intimately, who had instances where he would speak to them and they would say, something doesn't sound right. Even documented instances where he would physically assault some of his fellow unit members. Things that his unit members realized were out of character for Card. And so really the finger pointing is at the members of that unit who during their there was a commission that was held here in Maine that basically interviewed every one of the players that would have been involved here. When they interviewed his unit commander, he basically, there were certain times where he said he didn't realize that he was supposed to report these type of things and thought he could not because of HIPAA regulations. As we learned through that Army investigation, this was about a year ago now, they could reveal some of those things that were concerns about a person's medical privacy because they involved the potential danger to somebody else and because they had, I'm going to not be able to reiterate exactly the verbiage, but because they were working for the Department of Defense and at the time they were under the Army's supervision, there was expectations that those unit members would have reported up the chain of command the issues that they saw with Robert Card. And then they're also, again, taking to task the Keller Army Hospital, which is there in New York, which documented some of the issues, but ultimately, as the Army report investigation found, really failed to take any meaningful action. They allowed him to leave Keller Hospital despite having notices for the staff that he was not ready to leave. So this was difficult. I mean, there is a lot of finger pointing at the Army for what they did and did not do.
I'm curious as well if you've heard from, either through the law firms that are involved with this or the actual family members of those who were affected, have shared with you. I mean, we know what's on paper with the lawsuit, what they're seeking, but did they express what they hope comes from this? Should they be successful in court?
So I've not spoken with the attorneys about any type of money or settlement. I don't know that that's necessarily the goal. As you can imagine, the real goal is to make sure that the Army is held accountable, that nothing like this ever happens again. The Army had said during a press conference after it released its report that it was going to review its protocols, that it was going to start implementing certain things to essentially care for service members who were dealing with these type of mental health instances. The plaintiffs feel that that's not been exercised maybe as quickly as it could have possibly been. I don't really know that that's my place to say, because I don't know the inner workings of the Army and when they changed their protocols and operating procedures. But what I can tell you is that these survivors and these victims' families are really feeling like, what has the Army done to show us that they are holding themselves accountable? And if they're not going to hold themselves accountable, then we need to take them to court.
Well, I mean, there's been so many developments, and I know that you've been staying on top of all of them. We've looked over your reporting. I mean, it's been so substantial what you guys have been looking into ever since this, happened. What are you, I guess, looking for on the horizon other than, obviously what comes from this lawsuit? Is there anything else that you're working on, from a journalistic stance of this is another thread that we have yet to pull on that I'm really interested in pursuing? Are there any kind of I guess, loose ends that might need to be addressed as far as looking into something with this case?
Me personally, Vanessa, one thing that has come up has been, you may have seen a lot of reporting in the New York Times about the blasts that the soldiers go through, that they deal with when they're doing grenade practices or they're doing drills with their weapons. Robert Card was a grenade instructor, and there are the people who have analyzed his brain are worried about a traumatic brain injury. The scientists at Boston University, after his family donated Robert Card's brain to science to try to figure out, did he have a traumatic brain injury? These experts and these scientists and doctors believe, yes, there is an indication that there was some type of traumatic brain injury, but they can't necessarily connect that to the use of grenades in training. Robert Card never saw any combat, but he was training at Camp Smith in New York, just as hundreds of other Army soldiers do. And so there's been some legislation that's been tried to be pushed forward by lawmakers about how can they regulate the number of times that somebody is subject to those blasts because of the potential impact on the brain. We still have a lot of reporting to do there. We can't necessarily say that 1 + 1 = 2. The Army says in its report that came out about a year ago, they believe that there's no blast impact on Robert Card's brain. They believed that he suffered that traumatic injury when he fell off of a ladder or off of a roof working on a house many years ago. The families don't buy that. The families don't buy that. Scientists, I think, don't buy that. And so there is some more investigation, at least on my end, to do about what happens to a brain that is subject to hundreds, if not thousands, of blasts, even if they are from a distance away when an object like a grenade is thrown. So there are a couple threads along that front, right? Because we're talking about what could lawmakers do to address this issue if the Army won't do it itself, which it says they're going to do. So that's one that's really piqued my curiosity. The other one that's come up is about essentially who was in charge of Robert Card. that's been this sort of like passing the buck, passing the blame around that really never seems to resolve. The Army says that because Robert Card was not serving or not under their supervision because he was no longer in training when all of these other instances occurred, right? When we talk the incidents that led up to the shooting, contacts with law enforcement, when they would try to investigate, when they had gotten a call from Jeremy Reamer, the unit commander, the sheriff's office had gone to kind of do a door knock. They couldn't really get in touch with Robert Card. He refused to come out of the house. So there's stuff that has come out in our state that has tried to fill those gaps, to fill those loopholes. But I think a big question is who ultimately is responsible for a soldier, even if they're not performing U.S. Army duties. And so there is some finger pointing from the families saying it feels unfair that you can decide when you're supervising a soldier, especially if the impacts on the soldier come from the training they do. So again, there's a little bit of a stretch there. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily, a hard and fast 1 + 1 = 2, but I would say that that's something that I'm looking at to see if there's more we can dive into on that front, because I know there's a lot of people who are still frustrated by that concept, those gaps in the law that could have potentially intervened.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Those are some really interesting threads to follow up on and look into. So I'll definitely be interested to see what your reporting comes up with. Chris Costa, this was really interesting, and we just thank you so much for your time here, joining us on Live Impact News, and kind of not only just filling us in on the very latest, but also all of the context that you have gathered in the last 2 years regarding this case. It's really, I can tell, a labor of love for this point for the community, making sure that the community is getting what it needs as far as the information, from the stories.
We appreciate it. I know there are a lot of people out there who wish they had more information at the time, and so it kind of feels like it's our job at this point to give them as much information as we can now that we have access to it. 'Cause as you can imagine, during that 48 to 72 hours, there were a lot of things we did not know, and slowly these things have come out, and some of them have been really, really important, and we need to expand upon them to explain them fully. And then there are others that are just kind of little nuggets along the way that kind of add to the totality to it. So, excuse me, we even did a whole hour-long documentary about what led up to the shooting and then what the commission was doing in order to figure out how, and not that it was its job to come up with legislation or recommendations, but really just to kind of ferret out the facts. And then I think it's kind of lawmakers' jobs, the people in power, to make changes based on what's come out of all of the recommendations, all the investigations, all the reports, and then as journalists, right, it's our job to make sure that we hold them accountable to actually taking that action. So yeah, it's been a labor of love. It has been a labor of love. A lot of people up there that I really care about, that I see on a regular basis. They call Maine a big small town, and so Lewiston might be one of the top 5 largest cities in the state, but it's still full of people who, I get a text message from every week. So yeah, a lot of good people up there.
Yeah, well, glad to see the work that you're doing and the impact that it's having. Chris Costa, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Vanessa. Appreciate it.
All right. All right, folks, and that's the type of in-depth talk that we give you here on Live Impact News. Of course, many more discussions on different topics to come. We wanted to remind you once again, in just a couple of minutes, our NFL Countdown Special is going to kick off, if you will. And we've got our sports team standing by, bringing us the latest one-on-ones and just in-depth coverage, getting us ready for the new season. I know, Jeb, that you were assistant to this project. So.
Yeah, I got to watch some of it get done. I mean, our Spencer Collins, our amazing EP, was kind of the mastermind behind, obviously, the faces you see here. But folks, you can expect one-on-ones with Pro Bowl defensive tackle Derek Brown, J.C. Horn, Teteroa McMillan. They sat down with our amazing sports team and kind of answered some of the pointed questions that I think a lot of us are having going into a very highly touted season. And Eugene Robinson, who was obviously fantastic on Charlotte Today, he breaks down some of the X's and O's that will be key to the Carolina Panthers' success this season. So it should be a really, really phenomenal special. I know Nick, Logan, and Danielle worked really, really hard on it, so really, really excited to see kind of what that looks like in its final.
Yeah, our sports team has been really great as far as, giving us the latest, when it comes to the world of sports. But doing it with the in-depth specials, 2-hour long.
They go
sometimes,
crazy.
like, yeah.
WCNC Plus loves sports, and I think it's been a really, really neat opportunity for them to kind of grow our presence. I mean, I know I was talking to Carboni, and he absolutely loves the platform, loves being able to do some more of this long-form content to show people how cool sports in the Carolinas are.
Yeah, and y'all do a great job. Our sports team does a great job. We've got a live look for folks to take a look right now as we speak at Lincoln Financial Field, where we will have actually a game that's going to be on our air that folks can watch tomorrow. It's 8:20, right? Yeah, 8:20. Lincoln Financial Field, that's when the kickoff will be in Philadelphia. Cowboys, Eagles. Eagles are favored. Surprise, surprise. And you can watch it on WCNC Charlotte. Thanks so much for joining us here for Live Impact. We are now on to the NFL Countdown Special.